Welcome, travelers. I'm Josh.
And I'm Lewanika, and this is Tabletop Journeys, where we will be your not so humble guides on the quest for RPG adventures.
Welcome, everybody, to today's episode. Very excited to be coming to you once again. It feels like a while since we've been coming to you via video. We had the awesome actual play of Shadows from the Sacred Hills with Pete Saloon there. That was an awful lot of fun time. And joined as always by my co-host, Lewanika Miller. Mr. Miller, how are things in the tremendously southern state of Connecticut?
Well, I've never considered us terribly southern, but it is considerably warmer here than Maine on
Sure.
most of the day.
Yeah.
Things are going really well. As I've been saying for the past several months, very busy. I went through an spring convention season, and getting into summer had only one major event that I attended during the summer, but I'm about to come into a round of 2 or 3 different events coming up over the next few months. Culminating in one of my favorite events in the gaming sphere, which is a Catacon,
Yeah.
going out to Dayton, Ohio, headlining a panel with special guests, the team from We Can Be Heroes. So I'm very happy to talk about that. They're going to join me. So if you're in or around Dayton, Ohio, come to a Catacon for the whole
Yep.
thing. If you can't make it for the whole thing, at least swing by for 11 o'clock on Saturday. We've got a great panel. We're going to be talking about creation, creativity, and moving ideas from the brain space to the page. All things content creation and how we
Yeah.
did it, talking tips, tools, techniques, our processes between our team here at Tabletop Journeys and the processes that they use at We Can Be Heroes.
Yep.
We've been blessed to be a part of their journey along the way and early backers as well. So
Yep.
it's going to be a great time. I'm really looking forward to seeing Spencer and the rest of the team in
Yep.
person again. Can't wait.
Totally agree. Yeah, I am super jealous that you're going to a catacon and that I cannot get out this year. Had such a fun, tremendous time there last year. It was a great convention, and meeting Spencer and the guys was so much fun. Really glad to have them on the show earlier this year for We Can Be Heroes. I am jealous and want to live vicariously through you while you are gone. Yeah, but there's
I'm
that.
going to take as many pictures as I can, and
Yeah,
if I can get anybody to remind me to take video and pictures while I'm having fun, something I always forget to
yeah,
do while I'm in the greatness of conventions,
yeah.
I will certainly be sending back all kinds of reports, and I
Nice.
hope to be doing some on the right path stuff
Yeah,
from there as well.
nice. Nice. That'll be fun. That'll be a good time. And speaking of a catacon, of course, so next week Michael Ross will actually be joining us on the show. We'll get into that a little bit later here, but in the meantime, let's start talking about what we've got on tap for tonight, because I think that this is an episode which has been anticipated amongst us. We've been looking forward to doing this episode for a long time. We've been looking for, in fact, we would like to do more episodes, I think, kind of in this vein, as other companion products to the fifth edition of D&D come out. So tonight we're going to be talking about the first one to kind of come to print, and that is Tales of the Valiant. We are going to be doing, we're going to be talking 6 things about Tales of the Valiant tonight. Looking forward to kind of laying out what we enjoyed about kind of this first batch of products that they released, and talking it through a little bit here. So without any further ado, Mr. Miller, I think the first topic on tap here is yours, so carry on, sir. What do you got?
Excellent. Yeah. So speaking about Kobold Press and Tales of the Valiant, one of the things that when we've talked about it before, and when we talk about any new game, I always go with backgrounds and lineages and all that. I'm not doing that tonight. I'm actually going to pick some other things. Anything that we really have to get into a lot of deep detail. Those are things that Josh and I are going to be handling in our vlogs.
Yep.
Right now, we're going to hit some high level, high potency, high frequency information that we think will help describe the game well, show you the things about the game that we want to show you, basically highlight the things that need to be called out. Factors of differentiation or factors of similarity, I think, is probably a good way to kind of look at it. So, my first one is really just talking about the level of guidance that uh, Kobold Press has really put into this game. We've talked about it a lot of at great length on many shows over a vast amount of topics, but teaching new players what they need to know to be able to play the game and have fun, teaching new game masters or even veteran game masters how to teach new players. Um, Taking the time, taking the word count, taking the space to add good guidance throughout your book, not just in the first chapter, is critical to success and hopefully adoption of new games. And I think Cobalt Press really knocked it out of the park. I'm going to highlight the big one that I called out because it's one of the very early ones. Happens to be on page 9 of the Tales of the Valiant Player's Guide, and that's rules to remember. Um, Josh is going to put that up on screen for us, but basically, it's a really concise way of looking at how tabletop games get played. 6 basic topics, specific beats in general, uh, always rounding down, advantage versus disadvantage. You do one and not both. Only roll when prompted. Wow, that is great advice. I don't know if that was in the 2014 Players Guide or if that's in any other games, but it's an important thing to call out, and they called it out here in a big way. GM has final say, and fun is collaborative. The watchword of Tabletop Journeys since the very beginning has always been collaborative storytelling, collaborative world building, and to
Yep.
see it in print by a major company in and highlighted in such a way is very gratifying and soul satisfying for me as a
Sure.
gamer and as a content creator.
Yeah, I mean, so Tales of the Valiant is certainly not the first book to go ahead and talk about collaborative role playing collaborative role playing and collaborative world building. There we go. But it's certainly the first one in kind of the 5e ethos to go ahead and do it. Which is really, really, like you said, it's really gratifying that kind of these rules are starting to make their way into the biggest role playing game in the world, right? And we have talked at nauseum about how gaming books in general need to be better at teaching storytellers how to storytell and teaching
Yep.
game masters how to game master and teaching dungeon masters how to dungeon master, right? They need to be better at that. And so this is just one of those things that, like, it is just a really simple primer, kind of lays everything out right out there, right at the table. And I think that, the one in particular that really got me was the only roll when prompted, right? We have
Yep.
all been at that table where there's that uncomfortable sort of dynamic like momentary dynamic between a player and a storyteller when the storyteller is like, I'm trying to go ahead and not make you do anything that is a red herring. I don't want you to follow leads that aren't, sometimes you want them to go ahead and follow them, but sometimes also you want to go ahead and make sure that they kind of stay within the box, that they don't get totally out of the rails. And the player's like, well, can I roll for a perception check to go ahead and see if I can say anything, right? It kind of goes back to like the principal rule. Don't make them roll a role that they can never succeed at, that kind of
Yep.
thing, right? And vice versa. Don't make them roll a role that they can't fail at either, right? Make sure that the role is to go ahead and adjudicate something that could go either way. And it should be coming from the storyteller down. The storyteller should be inviting the players to participate in the challenge. The players shouldn't be fishing off the edge of their boat looking for the challenge, right? The storytellers need to be able to lead the horse to water if he expects them to drink. So yeah, I totally agree. The
Yep.
the layout
I,
and the system to go ahead and knock this out has been fantastic, I think.
yeah, absolutely. And I would, with the prompting for roles, I think it's also important to add the fact that uh, the beauty of that is that by putting that advice in the player's guide, that's where it needs to be seen. I'm fairly confident that that information is somewhere in DMGs in many other games, probably in the
Sure.
2014. My guess is it's in there somewhere. But what good does it matter? The GM's not the one who needs to see that. The players are. So the
Right.
fact that they put the advice where it needs to be is perfect.
Yep.
Also, this is a core book. It's not a one or the other. They say it's the player's guide because a lot of it is very player focused, but it's the rules of the game and all of the rules of the game and the player focused how to build your character stuff.
Yeah.
That's an important key to how this book is laid out.
Yeah.
There are other things in here as far as good guidance. There's fantasy in a nutshell. They just talk about what fantasy could mean, what it should mean, how it looks at your table. There's a PC checklist when you build a character. You know what your character should look like when you're done. It says, did you do all these things? Is this how it is? And that way when you're done. A lot of games are starting to do this now, but I call it out here because I got this book first, right? Doesn't matter if every other game that comes after this ended up at my doorstep has it. This is the first one I saw with it. So I really like that. And saw in a way that it was called out. And equipment at higher levels. If you're playing a game and you want to start at sixth level or fifth level, what's one of the last questions when you're building a character? Hey, how much equipment do I get? I'm actually sixth level. How come I'm only starting with X? Right? This actually covers gold and equipment and all the other things, and the methodology for determining how much you start with at variant levels. They do it by tier. So if you're starting in tier 2, it lists what you should have, so on and so forth. Great charts, great guidance all throughout the book, but those are just some of the highlights.
Yeah. Cool. So my first topic here is going to be kind of a big one that I'm going to desperately try to go ahead and distill down into a couple of minutes here. But in general, I think that there was a really elegant way that they designed their classes and subclasses this time around, right? I think that one thing that we have been talking about, and one thing that we really hoped to see in the 2024 revision, was subclass power level standardization, right? Every subclass should be getting getting powers at the same levels, because then it allows for going for not only interesting subclassing, but it kind of breaks apart the min-maxing ability, where you can kind of cherry pick your way through classes to go ahead and kind of always hit on their best powers and kind of build these like massive characters, right? So that sort of thing really kind of helps the layout of the design. And I think Tales of Valiant got this right. They did it in the right way. Not just that, but like, this kind of the way that they mixed up some of the really interesting powers and stuff like that. The way that they mixed up like clerics, for example, right? When they were talking about how the power, the way that clerics get power now, and I'm trying to remember exactly the way that they called it, but the way that clerics now focus their power through their divine energies, mastering the divine, or whatever. I'm losing my losing my mind on what it's actually called now. But but kind of the way that they're designing, the way that they're giving these classes super narrative hooks on where all these things are coming from. That's the kind of stuff that the D&D classes are missing. Are that narrative basis, I think that that it's a really interesting way to go ahead and hook it in there. I was listening to another podcast earlier, and the hosts were talking about whether or not kind of a takeoff on the specific versus general rule that we were talking about just a second ago, but how whether or not how strongly a class should tie into the narrative. And the the very unhelpful answer is that a class should tie into the narrative just enough so that it is important but not crucial, right? They were talking about whether or not, like, should I have to join a particular faction to gain a certain subclass or something like that? And they're like, no, you absolutely should not have to go ahead and do that. That's way too much. And a discussion that you and I have had a lot, where they were talking about paladins, and whether paladins relieved from their gods mean that they can't be connected to gods and stuff like that. All that to go ahead and say that the way that Tales of the Valiant is approaching this is kind of like, the straight line is approaching the circle of narrative and just touching it at a point and then spinning off. So it's got just enough that the players can sink their teeth into if they want it, but not so much that it limits their creativity on the type of character that they want to go ahead and build. And I think that was done really, really well.
Yeah, a plum, I think, is the perfect way to describe that. I've got a couple quick hits on that topic, and I'll just mention them by name, because my plan is to really go into some of the specifics in deep dives on the vlog. I know you've got some topics as well, and you're likely to hit a couple classes as well. But they did a great job with how they put in some narrative bits to their classes. The Druid Wild Shape, they specifically state by rule that a character should have familiarity with a given creature to be able to uh, wild shape into it. Is that a nerf from 2014? Absolutely. Is it a necessary nerf? I would think so because it's also very narratively driven. If you're from the Great White North, how would you have seen a scorpion? How would you be familiar enough with it to make that your thing? Reading it in a book, seeing a picture of it, seeing it once, that's not familiarity. It's still loose enough where the DM at the table or the GM gets to work with the player to determine what familiarity means. Did you have it for a couple days? Is it similar to attunement? Let that go with your table as far as how in depth or not in depth you want your table to be. But now they've got some rule support for making that a thing. I think stuff like that is very strong. Bringing in some of the interesting types of actions into the martial action for fighters. So
Yeah.
all fighters do some battle mastery type things, yet they still have their weapons master who does above and beyond that. Those
Yeah.
are great narrative feels. So now every fighter is a battle master of sorts, but yet weapons masters are much more specific. Monks, deflection of missiles is part of their first level ability, and it's weaker and not as cool as it gets higher on, those types of things. The way subclasses, justice and vengeance. Again, I could go on and on and on, and I will absolutely not go into any detail about the Ranger because rest assured, I'm going to go deep, deep, deep into the TOV Ranger.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I will say this as a spoiler alert: it is not the panacea. It does not solve all of my issues, but it is a far cry better than what I've seen out of WotC 2024, and it is a far cry better than anything that came out of 2014 and or Tasha's.
I mean, that wouldn't have been that difficult. So that's,
It's a low bar for 2014. It's a
yeah.
low bar, but they did specifically put in some exploration stuff
Yeah.
into the abilities, which is why
Yeah.
I think it's better than 2024. We'll see if
Yeah.
other things support that in gameplay. That's really where the rubber meets the road.
Yep. I'm not going to go down that road, but yeah, I think that there's a reason why 2024 did not solve the issues that and that reason comes down to money, but we'll see.
Yep.
All right, let's move on then. So you want to talk about spell circles and magic
Yeah.
sources.
Yeah. Magic sources and spell circles. It's something that WotC in Unearthed Arcana talked about very early on. It was probably the number two thing that I was absolutely enamored with when WotC was talking about it. I knew TOV was already going to be doing it, and I was excited for the fact that this was going to be a thing for two of the biggest players in this specific space. Um, Unfortunately, WotC backed off of that. TOV did not. So having spell sources, one being primordial, I think primal was what WotC called it,
Mhm.
and that covering what your rangers and druids do. Arcane being that which your wizards and sorcerers do, or in
And
your
bards.
mechanists and bards. Divine being that which which your paladins and clerics draw from.
And
Having a
druids.
source.
Oh no, druids are
Pardon?
primordial. You're right. Druids are
Yeah,
primordial. You're right. Yep.
correct. But having these sources that people draw from does a number of wonderful things for game design and for narrative flow. Basically, if it's in one of the, and while there are special features that might let you draw from other sources, the fact is you can generally say anything from this source has a feel. You can narratively make that call. It makes sense when you're having a certain type of adventure that you're going to deal with creatures that deal more one way or the other or whatever. So you can have these strong thematic elements to your games, depending on how you want to flavor them. I think sources is a grand way to do it. And then when you start talking about your ability to flavor your classes or flavor your subclasses, you know, having characters or subclasses that draw from a source, a specific source, or a feat that leans into a source gives you this textural feeling because you know that anybody who draws from this source is typically druidic or typically ranger, or anybody who draws from this other source is a paladin. They're a cleric. These sources of power really add narrative to it. A barbarian who might be a spellcaster, well, then maybe you want to give them things from that primordial list because that flows with the barbarian narrative.
Or the
And I
weird.
think that's yeah, or the weird if you're going to be a warlock, because warlocks get things from that aberration type place, and that was never in the WotC idea. That came out of left field for me, and when I saw it, I'm like, of course you would do that. Why wouldn't you do that? It just felt intuitive, and you
Yep.
can't ask for an easier way to adopt a concept in a game than to have it feel intuitive. And I
Yeah.
think they really knocked that out of the park. On the downside, circles, levels, rings, circles. In playtest documents, it was called rings. Now it's called circles. Honestly, of the three terms, I think rings sounded better, but whatever. I get why they didn't go that route. Is it different than levels? No. Is it better than levels? Not particularly, unless you're a brand new player coming to the space and don't realize that a second level character doesn't cast second level spells. And because of that, I'm okay with it.
Hey,
I
that's
think it's good
exactly,
for new
yeah,
players.
it's
And
fantastic for new players. Because I
and I
ran,
think
yeah,
WotC toyed with that idea and then they dropped it. And
yeah,
I think it's a shame. I think the idea of this game is I'm 53 years old. I got maybe 30 more years left of playing in me. And that's if I don't fall down the stairs or continue to wreck my arms and elbows like I've been doing over the last 2 months, right? They got to build this game for everybody to come after me.
yeah,
And for new people to come in, let's make it easier for them to pick it up. I
yeah,
got it because I've been doing it since the beginning.
yeah.
Somebody else doesn't have it because they have only been doing it since today.
I was gonna say you kind of stole my thunder on that one, because that's exactly what I was gonna say. Is that 2 weeks ago, I read this and I was like, oh, spell circles. They're changing stuff just to change it. What's the point? Why are they doing that? Doesn't make any sense. Whatever. It's unnecessary. And then, so I'm running my home game with 4 players who have barely played before and 1 senior player. And I'm trying to remember if it was my ranger character or my cleric player. I forget which one, that was talking about how, because they just leveled up into second level, so they get, it must be my ranger because he gets spells, right? And he gets first level spells. And he's like, well, wait, okay, so I have first levels, I'm just now getting first level spells, but now I'm second level. And I was like, that's why changing it from levels to circles makes sense. That's why, because they're using the same word to mean 2 different things, and it's confusing to new players. It
Yep.
absolutely is. So, it is what it is. So, yep.
Yep. I'm fine. I understand legacy. That's why they still use big numbers and not the bonus numbers
Sure.
for stats. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other, but I've been here since the beginning.
Yep.
If you're a new player, that stuff's confusing.
Yep.
I'm glad Tales of the Valiant, I'm glad Kobold Press saw that, and at least as it relates to spells and spell circles versus spell levels,
Yep.
they chose to err on the side of the new player.
Yeah.
That's a solid action. My hat's off to them for that.
All right, I am going to crack into the topic that I am most excited to go ahead and talk about. The thing that I looked through this book and said, this is something that I can use right now, today, at my table. And that is how Tales of the Valiant has replaced the ephemeral, unknowable, inconceivably complicated inspiration mechanic with luck. The luck mechanic in this game, it a lot of times, because we're both musical, we'll say, oh, this mechanic sings, it feels really good. This mechanic screams. We're talking like David Lee Roth, height of Van Halen days,
Yeah.
like knocks it out of the freaking park. Before you get into how good that reference is, let me just go ahead and prime real quick here. So basically, instead of a single do I have inspiration or not, luck is a pool. It's a meta currency. Players start with none. They gain a luck every time they fail on an ability check or an attack roll. They gain 1 luck. They can have up to 5. And they can use those 5 points to basically buy other things. They can buy a +1 to a given roll. They can buy a reroll if they have enough, that kind of thing. The best part about it, though, is that players can have up to 5. If they have 5 and they gain another one, instead of gaining more, they roll a d4 to see how many luck they lose. and they can't spend them immediately. Doesn't work that way. They gain luck after the adjudication of a roll. So if you roll and you don't think you made it and you're at maximum luck, spend your luck. Do the thing, because if you fail, you're going to gain another one and then you're going to lose a bunch. I love the way this mechanic sings, and this mechanic, I have got an episode coming up on Dr. Homebrew about luck and how storytellers can use it to their advantage also, with a mechanic that I'm publishing called Bad Luck. Really excited for this. Really stupid excited.
There's Eric Clapton blues thing in there. Bad luck and trouble follow me all my days in there. In
Yeah.
reference to how well Luck sings, I was gonna give a whole David Lee Roth thing with how well he kicked in Panama with his legs going all over the place.
Totally. Yeah,
But
yeah.
instead, if I'm gonna talk about how well Luck sings, I'm gonna go with the opening lines to Zeppelin's "The Immigrant Song." This is Robert Plant's scream at the beginning of that song, leading into the rest of the song. That's the opening to the Immigrant Song, where
Yeah.
you feel the momentum building and you feel the energy coming
Yep.
and you feel the power of a mechanic and its impact to the narrative.
Yep.
I'm not, Josh, you said everything that needed to be said about it. I won't belabor that. I'm just going to say, hell's yes. This is all the
Yep.
things, all the GD things.
Yep. 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 All right. You're next.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the release schedule of Tales of the Valiant. It's a
Yeah.
little
The super
business.
sexy topic that is the release
Yeah,
schedule.
yeah. Content creators love this stuff. So all the content creators, comment in the down below. Tell us how much you love this kind of information, because I think it's very telling for how we do things, how we set up Kickstarters, how we set up crowdfunds,
Yep.
how we release products, and I think it's good information for new and smaller content creators such as ourselves and giant content creators. One and all and alike. This is really just talking about all the products that are currently available here by Kobold Press, specifically with the logo for Tales of the Valiant. Not to mention all the other things that they have that are compatible with it, because it is compatible with almost everything else they've done and several other products that were in kind of co-production and have been being released in between the releases here. But if it didn't have the symbol, I'm not really talking about it here. I'm more talking about just the specific Tales of the Valiant. In the first month, they released the Player's Guide, the Monsters Vault, and the GM screen. If you're an early backer, you kind of got you had the opportunity to get all three in a package. But generally speaking, all three of those are what comes out in the first month. In addition to that, they had a number of free and very low cost PDF adventures that were released as these things were coming up and as they came out. So there were actually a spate of adventures that were available the day that the Player's Guide, Monster Vault, and GM screen hit. Amazing. This is a game that was ready to rock the moment it hit the stands in general. There is a caveat to that, which we'll get to in a moment. But, and that's an important caveat, also word to the wise for content creators and for big companies, especially you big companies out there. This is an important fact that we're going to get to on that. But the fact that this game not only had the ability for players to build characters, GMs had useful information on a GM screen, so they knew all the big ticket items that they needed to be aware of. But the Player's Guide is a core rule book. They had the ability to build their own adventures and play the game from the rip. And then we had a series, I think 4 to 6 when it first came out, adventures that were available at variant levels, so that they could then play written adventures and intermix their own adventures within that. And they had a packet sheet free of charge available for pre-generated characters for those of us who like to do early release and play test runs and playthroughs. We had that available and a bunch of other stuff as well. Conversion guides for content creators, all kinds of other good stuff. Creators kit for content creators as well. All these things were available basically by the end of the first month this game was out. As we're recording now, almost 2 weeks now, I've had the GM's guide and a full map folio, 10, 12 maps that are full size physical maps if you get the big thing, or available VTT or available PDF, so you can use them digitally, of various scenarios and all, and that are, they're huge maps. They're really big maps, and they are double sided. If you play at a game store like I tend to do, you can put plexi over the top of them to keep them down, and that way you can draw things. You can put minis on it. It's amazing what these things can do. This is a game that's ready to roll. If I wanted, or if you as a player really wanted to play a campaign and start it off, and you have your own ideas, but you needed some anchor stuff, you've got pre-written adventures to start to anchor things, and then you can seed in your own things and get your own plot going. And you can do a campaign as of the time of this recording. In contrast, the other big company out there, WotC, has released a PHP.
Yep.
There's anybody else hearing crickets?
Yeah.
In a month from now, they'll have a DMG. Is that more crickets? And as the wind blows through the cold, cold winter by February, we should, provided everything comes out on time, have a monster manual. I'm not picking on their release schedule. I'm not saying that they should be able to do these things faster. I'm more talking about the order in which they released. Tales of
I mean,
Valiant
they should be able to do this faster.
you could use, right? They released it in a way that allows the game to be fully playable.
Right.
WotC has not.
Right. And because
I think that's the big takeaway, is that content creators, think about that. If you're going to do a brand new system, a core rule book and at least one or
monster
two
manuals,
adventures, and a monster manual of some kind, or something, some resource to make it possible for people to play your system, is critical.
Yep.
Having your game come out on day one and having it only good enough for a one shot is not a good release schedule. By the way, WotC's starter adventure is not due till sometime next fall, a year from now. That's a crying shame and a tragedy.
Yeah, and I think that it's because WotC is they're trying to play the this is backwards compatible game too much. The problem is that if you make a character with the 2024 rules and try to use it against 2014 monsters, those 2024 characters are going to absolutely decimate you. You've got to crank up the encounter level for those characters now. You just do. And there are ways to kind of convert characters from 2014 rules into 2024 or whatever, but they're not complete. So it's kind of like, well, am I using a 2014 subclass or whatever? There's a lot of ambiguity, and so they were trying to, and in all fairness, they're trying to do something really, really hard. They're trying to go ahead and update a rule set and make it backwards compatible with all of the 10 years worth of books that they've already put out, right?
Nothing about that is easy.
Nothing about that is easy.
Yeah.
So,
And on the front of whether you should create brand new or how to convert existing characters, already recorded, already edited, and scheduled for release, less than a week and a day. Actually, tomorrow from the date we're recording, but it'll be a couple weeks ago. We'll probably put it up over here or over there at the end of the video, but we'll definitely point to the creation versus conversion of video from on the right path, where I discuss that very issue.
Yeah, exactly.
It's important. Now, I mentioned that there is a
dark side. Yeah,
there is a downside, and this is not unique to Kobold Press.
Right.
And I do not say this downside is quote unquote the fault of, but it is a consideration that big companies need to be aware of, and game stores need to also be aware of. Availability.
Yep.
Early backers got it. If you go right to their online stores, you can get it. You can get it shipped to you, whatever. I'm confident it's probably available on Amazon. I have not looked. I don't know. But I'm sure it's available in multiple places. But at your local game stores, if they are not using very specific vendors, they may not have these books yet.
Yeah.
And for a game that's been out since August or just before August, because I ran with physical books and maps in hand on August 15th. It is a shame that it is still not in some or all
Yep.
local game stores. And it's not that they haven't asked about them or put them on order, it's just their distributors don't have them.
Yep.
Now, I recognize that it is a business model for big companies to get people to use their favored distributors versus any old distributor. But as a person who used to own a comic book store, you go with the person who brought you to the dance, right? And at a certain point, if you have a working relationship of multiple years with a given distributor and they've been solid with you, they provide you what you order once they have it. Why do you go to somebody else who always makes you second fiddle, who you order 100 and you get 50? You
Yep.
know, that's the world of comic books. That's the world of Magic the Gathering.
Yep.
Oddly, also WotC.
Well, so actually,
But
so I mean,
but
but
it
to
it
that
is
point
it
though,
is a problem that it is hard for
yeah,
some local stores to get this game
yeah,
in that way without going direct, which hurts their business model, even if they want to put these games on the shelf. So companies, look at other distributors. Other distributors,
yeah,
get these games earlier if you can. Local game
yeah,
stores, I recognize you gotta go with with your main distributors, but sometimes you might have to get 5 or 10 copies to get it on your shelf so you can
yeah,
build up that pre-interest.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, so it's a little about this goes to everyone, right?
yeah,
Companies need to do a little differently, distributors need to do a little differently, and I hope that all my dear friends in the local game store place, and I
yeah,
get the margins and the pressures you're under. Truly, I do. So
yep,
I'm not casting shade, but I'm saying sometimes you may have to stretch just a little bit to get these there because
yeah.
I, as a game master, I, as a podcast host, I, as a player and a lover of tabletop games in general, I want to demo these games today.
Yep.
And I can't demo them at your store if you don't have them on your shelf,
I think
even
that
if I've got them in my hand.
I think that you unfortunately answered your own question there, right? Is why are game stores not trying harder for this? It's because they're making space for Wizards of the Coast books when they come out. The Wizards of the Coast 2024 Player's Handbook was the fastest selling D&D book in history. So they're going to continue to sell that.
Yep. And you're not
Just the way
wrong.
it is. Like that is at the end of the day, it is a numbers argument. And that is going to sort of take us to kind of the last point that I wanted to talk about here. And I want to kind of preface by saying that, you know, I've said a lot about the Kobold Press and Project Black Flag thing from the very beginning. Um, I really enjoyed what I read in this book. I want to go ahead and start with that. Okay. Here's kind of where my desire for them to have done different comes from. And you and I were talking to a very close friend about this a little while ago, and he very kind of succinctly summed up what my feeling was is that the book is great. I'm not sure a lot of it was totally necessary, right? I'm not sure that a lot of it really was needed, especially given the 2024 revision. A lot of it was kind of rehashed in the 2024 revision. And I think that that kind of gets to the core of my question is that I think that this book and maybe Tales of the Valiant as a brand from Kobold doesn't actually really know what it is. It doesn't know if it's a new game or if it is a 5e compatible module or alternate rule set. And the reason why I say this because they made some really weird changes about renaming stuff. Like we talked about the whole like spell levels versus spell circles and everything like that. And we can justify sort of saying, okay, well, we know why they made that change. That's a change that sort of makes sense, right? But I'm looking at things like, and you know, and then we look at like the classes. We say, well, they had to go ahead and name the artificer the mechanist because the artificer is a protected term and stuff like that. Okay, so we can justify that one, right? So there are a couple name changes that are justifiable or at least understandable given the copyright landscape that they're contending against. Things like taking feats and renaming them talents when they're exactly the same thing. Kind of unnecessary. And it kind of hints that, like, you know, for a game that kind of purports itself to be 5e compatible and to say you can use this with other 5e stuff, and isn't this wonderful? It's 5e, then to go ahead and say, oh, but we have our own character sheet and we rename some of the things and they're just different. again, kind of makes it feel to me like it wants to be thought of as a different game, but it wants to have the benefit of being on the back of 5e because it wants to be popular. They want this game to be played in the same vein, or they want it to be spoken of in the same breath as 5e content, but they also want it to be a different game. And they're trying to go ahead and split that difference. And I think that they are. We talked about the grace and the aplomb that they went through with class mechanics and the luck mechanic and everything like that. This is one where they're not handling it particularly gracefully. They're not doing it particularly well. They're trying to play both sides, and it's kind of like it's unnecessary. And that's my biggest kind of complaint is that there are some pieces of this that like I said, with the luck mechanic, I will lift this and use this immediately. But I'm not sure how much of the rest of this book I'm going to lift and use it by itself. I think that unless I am playing a Tales of the Valiant game, I'm not sure how much else of this I'm going to use.
So I think I have, as you have kind of shifted and come to a deeper understanding within your comments and feelings about around this topic over the last year or so. We've been talking about Kobold Press and Tales of the Valiant and Black Flag. I have also shifted, probably starting much more recently than you have. So kudos to you for
I'm trying to find the
your
middle. I
way.
really am.
Yep, you really are. And for and if anybody asks me, I think you really have. Um, for me, I have a much better understanding of why people have that feeling, and I think you hit the nail on the head. They did not handle that topic as well as they've handled other topics, and that's saddening to me, not maddening, saddening to me, because as a person who's been so deeply invested in this as a day one backer for just about everything that's had the TOV logo on it, with the exception of the most recent Labyrinth, and I'll get back to that in just a moment. Um, uh, I have not seen some. I have seen those name changes as being either completely non-effect not a non-issue altogether or exceptionally useful. And it's never been a bother to me,
Well, sure.
which is weird, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Well,
just
no,
like
it
it
either
never
matters or it
phased me.
doesn't. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, right. So, but I struggled with understanding why it bothered other people that it was so similar and with a different name. To me, I was more about the mechanics than the naming of it. It doesn't matter to me whether you call it a terrapin or a turtle, as long as it has a shell, four legs, and it sucks itself into its body. That didn't matter to me, and that is absolutely not a scientific argument. Please do not think I'm that dumb. But what I'm saying is, it mattered less to me the name of the thing, as long as the thing itself was good. And so, but I also understand that as I say that, the name of circles and versus levels made a difference, and I thought it was better because of the name change. So if I think about that, then the opposite also has to be true. So I get why that's a challenge for some folks. I would say this though, in my honest opinion, having run 3 uh, playtest sessions at conventions, they were, however, with newer players in general, so they did not have a lot of history with D&D. Um, and 2014 rules, and 2024 was not even close to being out at the time. I found that they found it different enough that it was different, but not complex that they didn't understand it. It was just different. So they needed to learn some newer things, right? So it wasn't that it was complex. It's just like if you're playing a 30-minute session, that's not a lot of time to get good at doing a thing, or a 45-minute session. So I think that that's a strong point for it is different, but yet it is close enough where it people can pick it up. And so I think that's an important factor. I want to play more. I want to get full adventures in. I want to get full campaigns in. That's why I talked about getting them on the shelves at my local game store, so I can run for a diverse group of players, our flagship store regulars, newbies, I want to run for as many people as possible. I want to start running some of this stuff for our Patreons as well. I want to get a lot of people playing the system so I understand how it all intertwines. You know, the first thing I can tell you is any and everything from the Monster Vault, use it. I would rather use every monster from the Monster Vault than any monster that has ever been printed in 2014. Period. Fact. I will go to my grave stating that their Monster Vault is better than anything WotC has done as far as monster manuals having to do with 5e. Period. No questions asked. None. That good. With that as a given, anytime I run any D&D module, I will probably replace or WotC module. I will probably replace him with the Tales of a Valiant monster. They are that much better. Tales of the Valiant monsters fix CR problems. Done. Use a TOV monster any and every time. Immediately liftable. Classes, again, that's a playtest. I got to see how it works. I can't even say that any class in 2024 is good or bad right now because I don't have anything to measure it against. I can't measure it against itself. I can't really measure it against anybody else. I got to get to play it more. So I will reserve judgment on that discussion until we get a chance to really run through our upcoming class warfares and such like that. And some of my deep dives are going to be made with just reading the book and going into it and asking for feedback from the audience members. But there's a lot of good stuff here, and I think some of the changes are a bit arbitrary. I think many of them, there's probably some reasoning behind them. I think Kobold would do a good job to kind of talk about those. I don't know if it's vlogs or articles, but I mean,
I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening because
I don't see it happening either, but that's really the only way they could fix it. So I mean, whatever. It is.
Here's
what
the thing:
is
I don't think that they see it as a bug. I think they see it as a feature because I think what they're saying is like, oh, look, we're not 5e. Look at this. We have talents. We don't have feats. They're the same thing. They are literally the same. Even if you read the conversion guide, it's like basically what the conversion guide says is that look at your feats, call them talents. There you go. Converted. Done. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that it is that they are fighting against the ethos that they set up when the OGL crisis happened. And they're saying that they're continuing to try to bang that rebellion drum because, I mean, I'm not the only one that was saying like, hey, if you're just going to back away from making your own game and you're just going to make 5e content, you should probably stop muddying the waters. Right. And they continue to make those waters muddy, and I will continue to go ahead and call it out until they decide to go ahead and clean that up because it's muddy. They're not being like they're not being completely secretive, but they're definitely being opaque about their intentions here, and that just always rubs me the wrong way whenever that happens, so it is what it is.
To wrap up the topic, I will just say this: it's a shame that we have to even have this discussion.
It's a shame that that's the part that we're discussing.
Because at the end of the day, as you said, this is a great book. This is a really good game. Obviously, I can't say excellent until I've played it and put it through its paces, right? I said similar things about 2014, that this seems really good. Then I played Adventures League for about 6 months. And then I ran a game, and about 2 years in, I said, I really like this game.
Yeah.
I think I like what I'm seeing here better than I liked 2014 at 2 months in. However, I also have the benefit of 10 years of 2014 adding in. So we're not comparing apples to apples.
Yeah, because this isn't that different.
Exactly. And that's the issue. They already start from I like this game, and but for whatever reason, they have Tales of the Valiant Kobold Press has chosen to make changes that I've been asking for since 2018 when I started playing 5e.
Like the heritage and lineage change. We didn't even talk about that tonight. It's fantastic. It's great.
Yeah. Heritages and lineages, we
don't have time to get into it.
We're not. Feat trees, talent trees. There's so many things within this game that we're going to do more episodes on that were all the things I've been asking for 6 years now. That the fact that they're giving me all the things I wanted is why I like the game. And it's unfortunate that there's these other things in the shadows that are that are creating issues.
Yeah.
I will leave us with one thing, and then Josh, take us home here, and that I love the fact that with all their subclasses, when they got to the rogue, they decided to make a rogue subclass and named it after one of the factions we put in a book a year ago
After one of from our subclasses book, exactly.
from our subclasses book.
Yeah, they named it the Enforcer, and it is also the Enforcer subclass in Tales of the Valiant is also a knee breaker. Now, I
Yep.
would argue that ours is better, but like what do we?
Yep.
It's written for a different game or maybe the same game. I'm not sure.
Yep. I would say this though. I do not think, and I am not purporting that they stole anything from us. They used the name.
We're not
features-
anywhere near that accusation.
Yeah. Do not ever tell anybody I said that, because I absolutely did not say that. What I will say is they have completely different features. I like their features,
Sure.
and they are different. They just happen to use the same name and try to fill a bit of the same niche, but they actually took it in a marginally different direction than where we went.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that we could take a name, a given role, and go slightly different directions with it. And I think that's very cool.
So, anyway, that is that's going to be our show for tonight. So appreciate out there listening. We'd love to go ahead and hear your thoughts on Tales of the Valiant as always. What are your thoughts on the book? Do you think that that this is a book that you're going to be using more at your table, or do you think that this much ado about nothing? We'd love to go ahead and hear your comments down below. Obviously, like, subscribe, enjoy the show, continue to go ahead and pick up the rest of the content that we have flying around here. As we alluded to on here, we are doing a bunch more video content, so we would love to go ahead and have you subscribe and check that out also. Let's see, next week on the show, so we've got we're wrapping up season 2 of our Star Trek Adventures actual play Preservations. It's got probably 4 or 5 more episodes to go in this season, so make sure you go check that out. Plenty of time to get caught up before the end of the season also, so make sure you check that out. All that content should be up on YouTube. All of season 2 should be there, so you can go check that out there, or go to www.ttjourneys.com and check it out all there. And then next Friday on the show, like I alluded to at the top of the show, we've got friend of the show Michael Ross coming. He's going to be popping on. I'm sure we'll be talking some Catacon because he is neck deep in preparation for that right now. But we're also going to be ostensibly talking about player agency and player choice and stuff like that. It's been kind of a hot topic lately about how to avoid railroading and how to kind of build in player agency while letting your players have a good time, but also keeping them on track to go ahead and go through the plots that you lay out. So we're going to be talking about navigating that kind of murky water that can kind of exist in there. So it's going to be a good time. Going to look forward to that. It's always a pleasure to go ahead and have Michael on the show. So it'll be a good time.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us here at Tabletop Journeys. We love talking to you. It's been a great night tonight. This is a great topic. You'll hear more about Tales from the Valiant as we go.
Well,
You, the audience, has the ability to let us structure what we do first, though. There's a lot in this book. There's a lot of books that they have. I've got a bunch on my shelf. I actually had to move my shelf and rearrange. So let us know what you want to know next about Tales of the Valiant so we can start putting that into rotation for you.
yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Yeah, we'll talk to you again next week with Michael Ross talking about player agency. So until then, have a good night.
Good night, all.